Good evening, children. Tonight's story is called Jason and the Voyage to the Edge of the World by Tony Bradman and Tony Ross. Chapter 1. The Golden Fleece. For a boy from a royal family, Jason had a pretty tough start in life. He was born a prince, the son of Aeson, the king of a Greek city. Aeson, however, had a brother, an evil, cunning man called PHINEAS, who rebelled against him. PHINEAS threw Aeson into prison and then sent his men to murder the baby Jason. But Jason's mother smuggled her son to safety, and Jason grew to be a fine young man determined to put right the wrongs PHINEAS had done. So one day Jason set out for his home city. As soon as he arrived there, he went straight to the royal palace and demanded a meeting with his uncle. The guards took Jason to PHINEAS, who sat on the throne he had stolen from Jason's father Aeson. "How nice to meet you, nephew," PHINEAS said. "Although somehow I have a feeling you're not just here for a family visit. What can I do for you?" "You can free my father and give him back his kingdom," said Jason proudly. "And if you do it now, I will ask him to spare your miserable life." "Brave words," said PHINEAS, laughing. "I could have you killed on the spot. But wait, I've got a better idea. I'll do what you want, on one condition." "Name it," said Jason quickly. "I hereby swear I'll accept whatever it is." "Very well," said PHINEAS, grinning at his guards. "I will gladly free your father and make him king again if you bring me the Golden Fleece." The guards howled with laughter, and Jason realized he'd been tricked. It was an impossible task. Many had gone in search of the Golden Fleece, and none had returned. But Jason had sworn, and he wouldn't go back on his word. "Is that all, Uncle?" he said. "I was expecting something much harder." Then he strode from the palace, the guards jeering, ringing in his ears. But Jason was a lot less confident than he'd sounded. He wasn't even sure where the Golden Fleece was, although legend said it was across the sea. So Jason went to Argus, the best shipbuilder in Greece, and asked for his help. Chapter 2. King PHINEAS'S Curse. Argus built Jason a beautiful ship with a tall mast and 50 oars, and Jason called it the Argo. Then Jason let it be known he was going on a voyage of adventure and needed a crew of heroes to accompany him. They came from far and wide, the greatest warriors of their time. They called themselves the Argonauts, which is Greek for the crew of the Argo. And they soon set sail. They travelled far and saw many wonders. They survived storms and treacherous seas. They passed safely through the famous clashing rocks. They fought savage tribes and monsters, and they grew to be more than just the crew of a ship. They became a true band of brothers. And Jason asked everyone they encountered where the Golden Fleece might be found. But it was only when they met King PHINEAS that Jason had any luck. King PHINEAS had been cursed by the gods, so every time he sat down to eat anything at all, he was tormented by harpies, foul flying demons who stole his food. Jason and the Argonauts walked into PHINEAS'S palace one day just as this was happening. Jason whipped out his sword and rushed forward. "With me, men!" he yelled, and a furious battle began. The air was filled with terrifying shrieks as Jason and his men threw their spears and slashed at the harpies with their swords, or shot them down with arrows, and the harpies fought back, beating at the Argonauts with huge wings and raking the men's shields and helmets with razor-sharp claws. But the Argonauts won in the end, killing most of the harpies and driving off the remainder. PHINEAS was overjoyed and couldn't thank Jason enough. "Oh, there must be something I can do for you in return," PHINEAS said at last. "Well, you could tell us where to find the Golden Fleece," Jason said, putting his sword back in its sheath. "If you know, that is. Nobody seems to." "I do know," said PHINEAS, the blood draining from his face. "But I wish you'd ask me anything else. To seek the Golden Fleece is certain death." "The only thing that's certain," said Jason, "is that I must fulfill my quest." Phineas was even more impressed by Jason now, so he told him that the Golden Fleece belonged to King AEETES of Colchis, and how to get there. It turned out that Colchis wasn't far from Phineas's kingdom, so Jason and the Argonauts bade Phineas farewell, and a few days later they rowed into the harbour of Colchis. Chapter 3. Cruel King AEETES. Colchis was a grim, forbidding city beneath an iron-grey sky. Soldiers lined the harbour walls, silently watching the Argo approach. The Argonauts tied up at the quayside, and Jason went with some of his men to call on King AEETES, leaving the rest to keep watch on the ship. "Greetings, stranger," said King AEETES, his voice cold, his face hard and unwelcoming. A large bodyguard of fierce-looking warriors was drawn up behind his throne. "Perhaps you would like to tell us what brings you here?" "I've come to ask for your golden fleece," Jason replied, deciding it was best to be honest. He noticed there were some other people looking on from behind the bodyguards, among them a dark-eyed young girl who was staring intently at him. "I need it to free my father and restore his kingdom," he said. "Now, why am I not surprised?" AEETES muttered, giving Jason a thin smile. "You're not the first young hero who's come seeking my fleece, and I'll tell you what, I've told all the others. It's yours, my boy. I will gladly hand it over to you, so long as you perform a couple of small tasks for me first." "And what might those be?" Jason asked, warily. Nothing too difficult," AEETES replied, giving Jason a brief flash of his cold, thin smile again. "Just a bit of ploughing and sowing some seeds." Jason felt sure AEETES was plotting something, but he decided to go along with it for the time being. So he agreed, and AEETES said that he could perform the tasks the next day. Then he invited Jason and all his men to a great feast. Jason sat next to AEETES, but noticed the dark-eyed girl staring at him once more. He found out her name was Medea, and that she was the king's daughter. And he also discovered that he couldn't help staring at her, too. At last the feast was over, and Jason and his men rose from the table to return to the Argo. But as Jason left the palace, someone tugged his arm. It was Medea, and she signalled for him to follow her to a dark corner. "Here, you'll need this tomorrow," she said, handing him a small jar of ointment. "Be sure to smear yourself with it before you start ploughing, and then listen out for me to tell you what to do once you've sown the seeds." "But why do I need this?" Jason asked. "And why are you helping me?" Medea just kissed him, then slipped away. She loved her father, but as soon as she had seen Jason, she knew she loved him more. Jason thought it was all very strange, but he had fallen in love with her too. So, in the morning, he covered himself with the ointment before he and his men set off for the palace. Chapter 4. Jason's Tasks. AEETES was waiting with his bodyguard at the gates and led Jason and his men to a field nearby. There was a large barn to one side. Jason spotted Medea among the other onlookers, and she nodded to him. "Let's get started," AEETES said. "Bring out the bulls for the ploughing." Suddenly the barn door flew open and two enormous fire-breathing bulls came thundering towards Jason. But Medea's ointment protected him from their scorching flames. He got the bulls harnessed and ploughed the field. The Argonauts cheered their leader, but AEETES frowned at Jason. "The job's not done yet," said AEETES. "Here are the seeds to sow." AEETES gave Jason a helmet full of what looked like sharp teeth. Jason shrugged and walked up and down the furrows he'd ploughed, casting the teeth to the right and to the left. Little did he know that they were dragon's teeth. To his horror, from each tooth there sprang a fully armed man. Soon Jason and his men were in a pitched battle, fighting desperately to save their lives. Then Jason heard Medea's voice above the clang of sword on shield. "Throw the helmet at them!" she yelled. "The one the seeds came in!" Jason did what he was told, and the instant the helmet landed among the warriors, they all turned on each other. Within minutes, they were all dead. "I've performed the tasks you set me," Jason said angrily, striding up to AEETES. "Now keep your part of the bargain. Give me the golden fleece." "Of course," said AEETES and smiled. "You'll find it in my garden." Jason told his men to wait while he went into the palace garden. It was a strange, dark, overgrown place with an evil atmosphere. Jason shivered and nearly jumped out of his skin when Medea suddenly appeared beside him. "Shh," she hissed at him. "We must be careful not to wake the dragon." Medea led Jason to the heart of the garden where a tall oak tree stood. Jason stopped in his tracks, filled with wonder, for there, hanging from one of the tree's branches, was the golden fleece. It shone with a magical glow, was even more amazing than Jason had ever imagined it would be. He could hardly believe that this fabulous prize, something so many other men had died seeking, was at long last almost within his grasp. But a huge dragon was curled before the tree, and Jason realized now why AEETES had smiled. AEETES thought Jason would never get past the fleece's guardian. However, Medea had given the creature a drug to make it sleep. Jason crept up and pulled down the fleece, but the branch snapped as he did so and fell across the dragon's scaly snout. Jason backed away, holding the fleece and his breath. The dragon slowly opened one eye and then the other. It looked at Jason, then leapt to its feet, roaring with fury. "Run, Medea!" Jason yelled. He drew his sword and slashed at the great beast as it reared above him, and then he turned and ran out of the garden too. AEETES was puzzled when he saw his daughter running past him, and furious when he saw Jason appear with the fleece tucked under his arm. "Kill the strangers!" AEETES cried, and his bodyguard moved forward. But just then the dragon burst out of the garden, roaring and breathing fire and stamping on anyone in its way. The palace and many of the nearby houses went up in flames. AEETES' men panicked, and Jason saw his chance. "Quick, men!" he called out above the din. "Back to the Argo!" And so the Argonauts made their escape. Soon they were rowing away from Colchis as fast as they could, a tall black cloud of smoke rising behind them. Medea stood close by Jason in the stern, knowing she would probably never see her father again, but she had made her choice and she was happy. Jason was happy too. He held the shimmering fleece in his hands and smiled. He had Medea with him and the Argonauts, his band of brothers. He couldn't wait to get back, to free his father and banish Pelias forever. The Argo moved swiftly homeward over the dark sea towards the setting sun. Well, that's the end of that story. I hope Jason is successful when he gets home to meet his uncle. That's another story, isn't it? Well, sleep well tonight, children. Say your prayers. I won't be reading you a story tomorrow night, but I'll be back in business on Monday. So until then, good night and God bless.